We're going to continue with that trajectory. Let's now bring in Gugulethu Quma, Mechanical Manager at Johannesburg Water, to also further unpack this. Gugulethu, we really do appreciate your time with us. Good afternoon. So, as Johannesburg Water, you have heard the various concerns that have been raised by the various residents in those affected areas. What is your official position as the entity on these issues? Poor communication, months and weeks long without water, intermittent or even no water supply at all, inaccessible or non-existent alternative water sources, water mafias, according to the minister.
Good afternoon to yourself and good afternoon to the viewers. Yes, understandably, and in particular, the area that you are in within the central supplied by the commando system, we do have historic challenges as far as the demand and the supply in that area, and most communities are affected, especially those that are in the higher lying areas. Yes, we do have both reservoirs at Estil 1 and Estil 2 currently on the rehabilitation program, and the area is supplied directly, which means on the bypass mode. That means alternate source. And it is definitely affected by the fluctuation of the supply, because now it's dependent solely on the incoming supply, as there is no reservoir supporting it with the pressure. As far as poor communication, I do believe that the entity is doing as much as possible to provide and the access of information to the residents, providing the status of the systems in the morning and in the afternoon. However, I think the issue is not necessarily the poor communication, but is the access to water. The communities need water, and we need to resolve that issue of water, and then we can now revert to the poor communication and so forth. But we do understand that when there is no water, it is definitely affecting the communities and the businesses and schools and all the economic activities within the area. Definitely, that matter needs to be addressed. As far as putting measures in place, there's already a new Brixton Reservoir and Tower that is currently in testing phase to be commissioned. There's upgrades to put additional infrastructure, additional storage. Rehabilitating those Estil reservoirs mean that we can have those additional storage capacities to supply those areas that you are referring to in the within the commando system. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, maybe while we're there, of course, Gugulethu, I'm sure you just heard at the back of my colleague there, Unati, who's currently on the ground in Emerentia. Talk to us about, because as we understand now from the reports on the ground, this is going to be quite a persistent issue, right? So talk to us about some of those municipalities that will be affected at this stage.
Definitely, if we're looking at the area that we're talking about, I heard that the plans that we have in place, the interventions, augmenting that area from North Cliff, or augmenting it from other supply, like from the pumping to Brixton, borrowing water, or rather, let's say, shifting water that is meant for another area and shifting it there. And we were doing all those interventions to bring water to the affected communities. I do hear the pain and the understanding. Remember, water disrupts the livelihood, and we do acknowledge that. But rightfully now, we're doing everything that is possible. And the 21 days, 14 days definitely is not acceptable. And alternate water, like those roaming tankers around. We also put stationary tankers in public areas, police stations, and the old age homes. But it's not meant to substitute the reticulated water. Water needs to come from the taps. But we do provide those measures as an extreme to ensure that they at least access to water so that communities can have water. But entirely within the city of Johannesburg, there are areas that are affected. You will see that in Midrand, we also had challenges there, but we are stabilizing that system. We're not yet out of the wood, but we are getting there. Most areas now have water, but the most critical area remains Commando, and also the South Hills that is also affected, as well as the Alexandra Park, which is also part of the central area that we are still referring. So we do understand that water is really a need, and it disrupts livelihood, it disrupts the schools, it disrupts police stations and everything within economic activities. And the entity is doing everything possible with the available resources to ensure that there is equitable distribution. Thank you.
Gugulethu, let's go back to this, maybe from your official position, right? Because we understand this is not just a single type of an issue. What are some of your incumbent systematic issues or challenges that you as an organization are currently battling that also hinders on your progress to maintain a steady water supply? I mean, we know there are quite a number of additional factors like your power outage. You've mentioned that, climate-related matters as we've seen with the floods. But internally, what's delaying the work from being carried out?
You would have noticed that we always provide that information that there's huge backlog as far as the infrastructure that should have been there. We're talking of almost 30 billion rand, and that's quite a huge amount when we're talking about the infrastructure that should have already been on the ground, but it's not yet there. However, we do appreciate that now there is a spotlight and there is a focus, and there are investments that are coming in the water space. We're also looking at the public-private partnership, but those framework also needs to bring in stability to the water infrastructure, because right now we need to ensure that we rehabilitate the existing one, upgrade it so that it can perform to its utmost best, but we also need to bring in renewal or additional storages so that we can respond to the increasing demand. Remember, the city needs to work, the city economic activities need to expand so that there are employments and all those economic activities, and water is crucial to ensure that it supports those ambitions of the city. So the investment is coming now, but the previous or historic investment was not there, which is affecting the current. Today is actually the reflection of what has been ongoing. Rightfully, there are projects, there are rehabilitation projects like 43 reservoirs have been identified. And in the short to medium term, they will be put into programs to rehabilitate them to ensure that structurally they sound. And Midrand is also identified as an area that is growing, and there are 4 reservoirs, new reservoirs to add to whatever the capacity that we have as additional storage to ensure that we are responding and have a sustainable operations as far as retention capacity in various spaces of the city. So there are projects in the city. However, the aging infrastructure is problematic because now that increased the non-revenue water. You will see that there's water running on the road, because now when there's water and there's no water, those pressure fluctuations, they affect the sensitive pipe infrastructure that is also aged underground, which means now we need to have reactive and responses and unplanned interventions to replace the pipelines that were not necessary in the program. So all those combined challenges, they bring the stability of the supply, and we are unable to, because we have to close the supply while we are putting those interventions. But the entity, with the resources that it has, it does everything that is possible to ensure that we respond so that there's less water losses, and we still manage to bring and supply the customers as much as possible. Thank you.
I want to stay on that point, Gugulethu, because I think this is a vital point when we talk about infrastructure, right? I'm sure you heard the representative from WaterCan saying this is an infrastructural day zero. Are there any concrete timelines at this stage that you can commit to us at this stage in regards to when these issues will be addressed, specifically in terms of long-term maintenance of vital water infrastructure that, according to independent reports, is currently poorly maintained and fragile? What is missing? Is it money that's not there for you to go out and carry out your duties and build these reservoirs and build these additional storage facilities? What is causing all these delays? That's what we want to know.
Definitely, putting the timelines is quite a tricky one, but we can confirm that there are various programs that we have, and they are communicated either through the various business plans and also community engagement. But day zero is not something that is within the discussions, because we are supplied by various systems. We have about 4 systems that supply the city of Johannesburg. When one collapses, we are able to do water shifting and move water from one side to another. But let's accept that the state of the infrastructure or the backlog of upgrading and the maintenance of the infrastructure is affecting, and it continues to creep in and causes all. If you're looking at the non-revenue water, just a portion of the physical losses, about a quarter of the water that we already have as a bulk water, is lost through those leaks, through those structural cracks or structural leaks within the reservoirs, the pipelines, and all the bulk infrastructure that is distributing the water. That is problematic because while we are putting the new infrastructure, the older one also needs attention. So we need to have a balanced approach to ensure that we maintain the existing one so that it can sustain us until we get the new infrastructure and the additional capacity in place. And let's say in the next 10 years, starting the organization or the entity has a 10-year strategic intent between 2024 up to 2034 to ensure that the public-private partnership, all the resources, the focus, strategic shift, and the pillars of the organization are talking to the strategic intention of providing water and sanitation services to the city of Johannesburg that is sustainable and equitable. Thank you.
Gugulethu, unfortunately, we're out of time. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. There's so much I still wanted to unpack because one of the residents in Emerentia was saying that they've never seen a water tanker from Johannesburg Water in the area. Those are only provided by citizens, and they say that whenever they try to communicate with the relevant authorities, they are being treated with absolute disdain. But unfortunately, we're going to leave it here. Thank you so much for talking to us this afternoon. That was, of course, Mr. Gugulethu Quma of Johannesburg Water, giving us an official position of Johannesburg Water. Of course, we continue shining the spotlight on the current water wars here in Johannesburg.